Hey, do you ever wonder how we get fat? I mean, there's a multitude of reasons why the process happens, but the process is pretty much the same for all of us. And I'm just going to try and put it in a nutshell for you to help you understand how we get fat and how we can get unfat. All right. So high blood glucose elicits the response, an insulin response, and insulin is a hormone. And insulin speeds the uptake of glucose by tissues, and it favors storage of that glucose or that energy in the form of glycogen or triglycerols. And the storage process inhibits what's already stored. So it's kind of a one-way street where we're storing fat instead of mobilizing it. So let me explain that in another way. High blood glucose comes from eating carbohydrates. Now, I know what you're thinking. If I stop eating carbohydrates, I'm not going to get that high blood sugar. But, you know, carbs are not bad. Our brain needs carbohydrates, so does many other metabolic functions. So I am not about eliminating carbohydrates from our diet. Don't even get me started on the keto diet, because we do need carbohydrates for healthy living. But too many carbs are the problem, and maybe the timing of the carbs might be the problem. So any type of carbs that we eat, it promotes, will get an insulin response, because our body likes homeostasis. When we eat carbohydrates, our blood sugar goes up. When our blood sugar goes up, the pancreas says, hey, let's send out some insulin so that we can moderate those blood sugars to bring them down. And then I also want to say that insulin is not bad, because the next thing someone might say is, hey, well, if I'm getting fat because I have high insulin levels, maybe insulin is the culprit. No, insulin is not bad. Just too much insulin is bad. Insulin's just a delivery system. And so what insulin does is it's going to deliver energy where you need it. So if you're exercising or you're using up your energy, that, blood sugar will be used for, immediate use. But if you're not using it right away, then what will happen is the energy will get stored in the liver or in the muscles for later use. So for example, let's say you ran a marathon, your liver and your muscles get depleted of glycogen. And so when you eat something, that energy gets stored back in your liver and your muscle for later use for the next marathon, for example, that you're going to do. But more likely what happens if it's not used for immediate use, if your liver and muscles don't need extra energy, then it's just going to get stored for a rainy day. The trouble is we don't really have many rainy days, and we're often sedentary, and so we have lower energy requirements. So if we're overeating, or if we have those high insulin and blood glucose levels, then lots of that energy just gets stored. And so the body shuttles the extra energy into fat stores, and we never get to actually mobilize the fat that's already in our stores. So increased insulin will prompt the storage of the unused energy as fat, and eventually we become insulin resistant. So that means that our insulin levels stay quite high. So now we have this one-way street of storage of energy into body fat, but not using the body fat as energy. And that's what we want to do, is we want to be able to take that body fat and use that as energy, rather than be storing what we're eating. We want to use the food that we're eating as energy, and then we also want to use the energy that's already stored as body fat, right? So there's that. So what's the answer? The answer is not eating no carbs. The answer is not reducing insulin. These are things that we need for healthy living. So basically, let me just recap this to say that fat accumulation is mostly determined by insulin, and our insulin levels fluctuate with the quality and quantity of carbs that we eat, right? And the more carbs we eat, the more insulin we ultimately secrete, and the higher our insulin levels, If we've got abnormally high insulin levels, then the more fat we could potentially accumulate, especially if we're not using up that energy. So ultimately, we need to find the right balance between carbohydrates to energize our body without causing fat storage. So I'm telling you, we need carbs, but we need just the right amount. We need insulin, and we need just finding the balance between our carbs, fats, and protein. Or it's also the food timing, because if we're just eating carbohydrates in isolation, then that's going to cause a higher insulin response than if, say, we're having carbohydrates with a bit of protein. So there's kind of some tricks that we can use to moderate our insulin. We don't want our insulin levels to be spikes and valleys. What we want is we want our insulin levels to be kind of rolling hills, so we don't have these, energy and then energy slumps, so to speak. So by learning how to eat with intention and purpose, and also enjoying our food, and by changing the composition of our food, not necessarily changing the quantity. We always want a high quality of nutritional density food, but by changing the composition of our food, we can change the composition of our body. And it does sound a bit complicated, but trust me, it's not rocket science. There's a lot of common sense principles that once you understand the process, once you're educated, and once it helps you to comply. So for example, if you know, hey, if I drink this or if I eat this at this time of night, I'm going to be up at 3 a.m. and I'm struggling with sleep anyway. Or if you know, hey, if I'm going to be eating just these carbs at breakfast, then I'm going to have the munchies and go into a slump by 10 a.m. and want to be eating coffee and donuts, but we give you an alternative, then it's easier to stick with the plan of, and plus if you're never hungry or you're not starving that you're going to eat your fist, then a nutrition plan is much easier to stick with. So anyway, it can be complicated, but it's not terrifically complicated when you understand the principles. My suggestion is to get educated in what's going on with your body, the basic processes, and then connect the dots between the foods you're eating and how you're feeling and how your body's responding to that. And trust me, everybody's different. It's not so great to have like a read it, need it plan is a great start. But especially if you're a seasoned dieter, especially if you're, maybe even a yo-yo dieter, there's some metabolic repair that we probably are going to have to look into, because a lot of my clients, believe it or not, are under eating. So my goal for them is to slowly increase their metabolism so that they're eating more and losing weight. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the process of how we're gaining fat and not losing it, but I do have some solutions for you so that you can be eating more and still losing fat. So I'll have a questionnaire in the write-up, and so feel free to fill that out. Let's get on a call and talk. If you want some more support, we'll see how we can, if we're a good fit to work together. All right, hope that helped. I've been yabbering on. Have an awesome day.